Commander Zixtal, the distress beacon has been activated. Excellent. How long until the nearest patrol responds? Well, sir, that's the thing. According to our sensors, approximately 3,000 vessels are converging on our position. Commander Zixtal's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sure sign of confusion among his species. 3,000? That seems excessive for a routine distress call. Yes, sir. And sir, they're all flying the same flag. Which fleet? The human Terran fleet, sir. If you've never seen a Kethmori go completely still, let me paint you a picture. Imagine a 7-foot-tall praying mantis suddenly realizing it's been praying to the wrong god this whole time. That's Commander Zixtal right about now. Did you just say humans? Yes, sir. The Deathworlders, sir. Now here's where our story really begins. Because Commander Zixtal had made what we humans like to call a tactical error. See, when you're part of a galactic civilization that's been cruising along peacefully for the better part of 10,000 years, you tend to forget that some species didn't get the memo about being civilized. The Kethmori had been having a perfectly reasonable day of interdimensional piracy, if such a thing exists, when their quantum drives decided to throw what can only be described as a mechanical tantrum. Stranded in the middle of nowhere, they'd activated their universal distress beacon without bothering to check the fine print. The fine print that clearly stated, "Warning, this beacon operates on all frequencies, including those monitored by Deathworld species. Use at your own risk. Side effects may include invasion, conquest, aggressive negotiations, and an inexplicable urge to share cultural recipes." Sir, Communications Officer Clinth chimed in, his voice achieving a pitch that would make a dog jealous. "Incoming transmission from the lead human vessel." "Put it through," Zixtal croaked, because honestly, what else was he going to do? The view screen flickered to life, revealing a human male who looked like he'd been specifically designed to make aliens question their life choices. Short-cropped brown hair, eyes the color of a particularly violent storm, and a smile that suggested he found the entire situation amusing in ways that probably violated several Geneva conventions. "This is Captain Luke Brennan of the UTS Defiance," the human said, and his voice had that casual quality that somehow made it more terrifying. "We received your distress call. Having a rough day?" Commander Zixtal tried to remember his diplomatic training. Something about appearing non-threatening and establishing peaceful intent. Unfortunately, his species had evolved from ambush predators, and non-threatening wasn't really in their genetic playbook. "Greetings, human vessel," he managed. "We are experiencing technical difficulties and would be grateful for assistance." Captain Brennan's grin widened. "Technical difficulties. Right. And I suppose the massive weapons array you've got pointed in our general direction is just for show?" "Ah, yes, the weapons. In hindsight, maybe leading with 'we come in peace,' while simultaneously targeting the approaching fleet hadn't been the best diplomatic strategy." "Those are defensive measures," Zixtal said weakly. "Uh-huh." Brennan leaned back in his captain's chair with the easy confidence of someone who'd had this conversation before. "Here's the thing, Commander. And I'm assuming you're the commander because you've got that 'oh shit, what have I done' look that all commanders get when they realize they've poked the bear. We humans have this quirky little trait where we respond to distress calls. All of them, even the ones from guys who are probably pirates. We are not merchants, right? Sure, merchants who just happen to be sitting on enough firepower to level a small moon. Totally normal merchant behavior." Brennan's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes suggested he was enjoying this far more than he should. "The thing is, when you send out a distress call on our frequencies, it doesn't just go to the nearest patrol. It goes to everyone. And everyone includes the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet, which was already in the neighborhood conducting what we like to call aggressive exploration. This is probably a good time to mention that humans have a reputation in the galaxy. Not a good reputation, mind you, but a reputation nonetheless. They're the species that looked at a universe full of sensible civilizations and said, 'You know what this needs? More explosions and questionable decision-making.' They're also the species that, when faced with the vastness of space, decided the appropriate response was to strap rockets to everything and see what happened. This approach had led to remarkable advances in both technology and creative swearing." "Captain Brennan," Commander Zixtal said, trying to inject some authority into his voice. "While we appreciate your enthusiasm, we merely require basic assistance with our quantum drives." "Oh, we're absolutely going to help you with that," Brennan replied cheerfully. Right after we help ourselves to a look at your cargo hold. You know, standard procedure. Make sure you're not carrying anything that might be, say, stolen from various colonies across 3 star systems. The silence that followed was the kind of silence that speaks volumes. Specifically, it was the kind of silence that screamed, "We are absolutely carrying stolen goods from various colonies across 3 star systems, and we really wish we'd read that fine print on the distress beacon." Communications Officer Clinth chose this moment to lean over and whisper urgently in Zixtal's ear. "Sir, we're picking up more transmissions. The human fleet is... they're placing bets." "Bets?" "On how long it takes us to surrender, sir. The current favorite is immediately, at 3-to-1 odds." Captain Brennan, whose hearing was apparently better than expected for a Death Worlder, chuckled. "Tell you what, Commander, I'm feeling generous today. How about we make this easy for everyone? You shut down your weapons, prepare to be boarded, and we'll make sure this goes nice and smooth. Maybe even throw in some decent coffee and a hot meal. Human food is supposed to be pretty good, I hear." Now, if Commander Zixtal had been a smarter Kethmori, he would have taken this offer. Human coffee was indeed legendary across the galaxy, though mostly for its ability to dissolve starship hull plating. And human food, while technically edible by most species, came with warning labels in 17 languages. But Commander Zixtal was not a smart Kethmori. He was a proud Kethmori, which is an entirely different and significantly more dangerous creature. "You dare threaten us?" he hissed, his mandibles clicking in what his species considered a threatening display. "We are Kethmori! We are the hunters of the void! We do not surrender to Death World primitives!" The reaction this got was not what he expected. Captain Brennan burst out laughing. Not the polite chuckle of diplomatic amusement, but the full-bodied laugh of someone who'd just heard the galaxy's best joke. In the background, other human voices could be heard joining in. "Did he just call us primitives?" someone asked between gasps. "I think he did," Brennan managed. "Oh, Commander, that's really good. Primitives. I love it." He wiped at his eyes and tried to compose himself. "Okay, here's what's going to happen now. See, you just made this personal, and humans have this really unfortunate tendency to take things personally." The view screen split, showing not just Captain Brennan but several other human officers from different ships. They all had that same predatory grin, like sharks who just realized they were in a school of very confused tuna. "Commander Zixtal," a female voice said from one of the other ships. "This is Admiral Rebecca Foster of the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet. I understand you've got some opinions about human capabilities." Admiral Foster looked exactly like what Central Casting would order if someone asked for terrifyingly competent military officer. Short silver hair, eyes like chips of ice, and the kind of smile that suggested she'd once eaten someone's liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti. "We were just having a friendly chat about surrender terms," Captain Brennan explained. "But the commander here seems to think we're not quite evolved enough for proper negotiations." "Is that so?" Admiral Foster's smile grew wider. "Well, that's unfortunate, because I was hoping we could resolve this diplomatically. But if the commander prefers a more traditional approach..." What happened next was a masterclass in human psychological warfare. Without firing a single shot, the human fleet began what could only be described as aggressive positioning. Ships that had been casually approaching suddenly became a perfectly coordinated swarm, each vessel sliding into attack formation with the kind of precision that suggested they'd done this before. "Many, many times. Tactical analysis complete," Communications Officer Clinth reported in a voice that had achieved a new octave of terror. "Sir, their formation it's beautiful." And it was. The human fleet had arranged itself in a 3-dimensional pattern that was part Death Blossom, part mathematical equation, and part abstract art. Every ship was positioned to provide maximum firepower coverage, while maintaining perfect defensive overlap. It was the kind of formation that military academies would study for centuries, assuming anyone survived to write about it. "Commander," Admiral Foster continued conversationally, "I should mention that we've been having a bit of a slow month. Training exercises are all well and good, but there's nothing quite like practical application to keep the crew sharp. So I want to thank you for volunteering to be our live fire exercise." We did not volunteer for anything," Commander Zixtal managed. "Oh, but you did," Captain Brennan interjected. "The moment you decided to be rude to people who were trying to help you. See, humans have this thing about manners. We're funny that way." This was, of course, complete nonsense. Humans were notorious throughout the galaxy for their flexible relationship with both manners and diplomacy. But the Kethmori didn't know that. and psychological warfare is 90% confidence and 10% really convincing lies. Sir, Navigation Officer Pelth whispered urgently. Our weapon systems are reporting targeting locks from all of them, sir. Every human ship has us locked. Commander Zixtal looked at his tactical display and felt what humans would recognize as that sinking feeling you get when you realize you've brought a knife to a gunfight. Except the knife is plastic, and the gunfight is actually a nuclear weapons demonstration. Perhaps, he said carefully, we could discuss terms. Oh, now you want to discuss terms? Captain Brennan asked with mock surprise. After calling us primitives? Admiral, what do you think? Should we discuss terms with someone who thinks we're too primitive for proper conversation? Admiral Foster appeared to consider this seriously. Well, Captain, normally I'd say yes, but you know how it is with primitives. We might not understand complicated concepts like negotiation or mercy. The human officers all nodded sagely, as if this was a perfectly reasonable concern. Tell you what, Commander, Admiral Foster continued. Let's have a demonstration of just how primitive we are. Captain Chen, would you mind showing our guests your new toys? Another human officer appeared on screen, this one looking like he'd been specifically designed to make weapons manufacturers weep with joy. With pleasure, Admiral. Initiating firing solution. Mark. What happened next was less a demonstration and more a revelation. One of the human ships, a sleek destroyer that looked like it had been designed by someone with serious anger management issues, opened up with what could only be described as precision firepower. They didn't target the Kethmori ship. That would have been rude. Instead, they targeted a small asteroid approximately 2 kilometers away. The asteroid, which had been minding its own business for probably several million years, suddenly found itself the focus of humanity's technological advancement. The first salvo was conventional weapons. Plasma cannons, particle beams, the usual suspects. The asteroid, being made of rock and metal, absorbed the punishment with stoic indifference. Then came the experimental weapons. That's our new quantum disruptor array, Captain Chen explained cheerfully as the asteroid began to glow with an unsettling purple light. Still working out the bugs, but the preliminary results are promising. The asteroid began to, well, disintegrate wasn't quite the right word. Cease to exist in any meaningful sense might be more accurate. It didn't explode or crumble. It simply stopped being, as if the universe had decided it was no longer needed. Impressive, Admiral Foster noted. What's the power consumption like? Negligible. The fusion reactors barely noticed. Of course, we're still not sure about the long-term effects on local space-time, but that's what field testing is for. Commander Zixtal watched this exchange with the growing realization that he had made a series of very poor choices. Starting with piracy, continuing with activating the distress beacon, and culminating with insulting the species that had just casually erased a mountain-sized rock from existence. Fascinating, he croaked. Very primitive. The silence that followed was pregnant with the kind of tension usually reserved for diplomatic incidents and custody hearings. Did he just... Captain Brennan started. I think he did, Admiral Foster confirmed. After we showed him the quantum disruptor? Apparently so. Captain Chen shook his head sadly. Some people just don't learn. Now here's where things get interesting, because humans have this wonderful ability to escalate situations in ways that defy logic, reason, and several laws of physics. What started as a simple boarding action was about to become what military historians would later refer to as the incident that made everyone else reconsider their life choices. All ships, Admiral Foster announced calmly, prepare for full demonstration protocol. Ma'am, came a voice from somewhere off-screen. Are you sure? The paperwork alone. I'm sure, Lieutenant. Besides, when else are we going to get a chance to field test everything at once? What followed was less a military operation and more a showcase of human creativity applied to the fine art of making other people's days significantly worse. The human fleet began what could only be described as a synchronized dance of controlled violence. It started with the smaller ships. Frigates and destroyers began launching what appeared to be standard missiles, except these missiles had been designed by engineers who clearly had access to far too much caffeine and not nearly enough adult supervision. Instead of exploding on impact with empty space, they began forming patterns, geometric shapes that pulsed with energy and quite possibly violated several interstellar treaties. Those are our new resonance mines, Captain Brennan explained casually. They create harmonic frequencies that can disrupt quantum coherence in most standard shielding systems. The light show is just a bonus. The mines arranged themselves in a perfect sphere around the Kethmori vessel, each one humming with barely contained energy. The harmonics they produced were apparently audible even through the vacuum of space, creating a low, ominous chord that somehow managed to sound both mathematical and vaguely threatening. "Sir," Communications Officer Clinth reported in a voice that had given up on traditional octaves entirely. "Our shields they're vibrating." "Vibrating?" "In rhythm with the mind, sir. It's almost musical." This was, of course, exactly what the humans had intended. Because if there's one thing humans excel at, it's turning military hardware into performance art. "That's just the warm-up," Admiral Foster mentioned. "Captain Torres, how are the gravity manipulators coming along?" A new human face appeared on the screen, this one belonging to a woman who looked like she'd been personally designing nightmares for alien species. "Ready to demonstrate, Admiral. Fair warning, though. This might get a bit weird." What happened next defied several fundamental laws of physics, and at least one philosophical principle. The space around the Kethmori ship began to twist. Not visibly, but in ways that their instruments could detect. Gravity stopped behaving in a predictable manner, instead flowing in patterns that suggested someone had been using the universe as a canvas. "Localized gravity manipulation," Captain Torres explained cheerfully. "We can create artificial gravity wells, reverse gravity fields, even make gravity flow sideways if we want to. The applications are limitless." To demonstrate, she made the Kethmori ship gently rotate along its central axis, as if some cosmic hand had decided to give it a spin just for fun. "Stop that!" Commander Zixtal demanded, though his voice lacked the authority it had possessed earlier. "Stop what?" Captain Torres asked innocently, even as she made the ship perform a slow barrel roll. "We're just providing a demonstration of primitive technology." By this point, the Kethmori crew was experiencing what psychologists would later term acute cognitive dissonance with a side of existential dread. They were also discovering that motion sickness was apparently a universal constant, regardless of species. "Sir," Navigation Officer Pelth reported weakly, "I think I'm going to be sick." "Hold it together," Commander Zixtal ordered, though he wasn't feeling particularly well himself. "Admiral," came another voice from the human fleet. "The temporal displacement generators are online." Admiral Foster's grin became positively predatory. "Temporal displacement? How wonderfully primitive of us. Captain Kim, would you care to demonstrate?" Now, here's where things went from unusual to someone really should have read the instruction manual more carefully. The newest addition to the human arsenal was something they called a temporal displacement generator, which was a fancy way of saying time manipulation device that probably shouldn't exist. "Certainly, Admiral," Captain Kim replied. And her ship, a sleek cruiser that looked like it had been designed by someone with a serious grudge against the concept of causality, began to emit a strange shimmering field. What happened next was the kind of thing that makes physicists wake up in cold sweats. The Kethmori ship began to experience time differently. Not faster or slower, but in a way that suggested time had decided to take a coffee break and let someone else handle the schedule. "You're now experiencing localized temporal displacement," Captain Kim explained helpfully. "From your perspective, time is flowing normally. From our perspective, you're moving through time at roughly half speed. It's completely harmless, though I should mention that the long-term effects are still being studied." Commander Zixtal tried to respond, but his words came out as a slow, deep rumble that sounded like someone playing a recording at the wrong speed. "Oh, right," Captain Kim added. "Communication becomes a bit tricky during displacement. Don't worry, it's temporary. Probably." The human officers all nodded as if this was perfectly reasonable, which it absolutely wasn't. "Sir," came a voice from one of the human ships, "should we activate the dimensional phase shifters?" "Oh, let's not get carried away," Admiral Foster said with the tone of someone showing remarkable restraint. "I think our guests are getting the point." She was right. Commander Zixtal was definitely getting the point, along with several other points he hadn't asked for and didn't particularly want. The point that humans were significantly more advanced than their reputation suggested. The point that calling them primitives had been a mistake roughly equivalent to calling a black hole a bit dim. And the point that he was in what humans would call a world of trouble. The temporal displacement field shut down, allowing time to resume its normal flow. Commander Zixtal found himself able to speak again, though he wasn't entirely sure what to say. Traditional diplomatic protocols didn't cover situations involving gravity manipulation, quantum disruptors, and time displacement technology. "I believe," he said carefully, "that we may have underestimated your capabilities." "Really?" Captain Brennan asked with theatrical surprise. What gave it away? The part where we bent space-time into a pretzel? Or the part where we made your ship do barrel rolls? Perhaps both. You know, Commander, I'm starting to think you might not have been entirely honest about being merchants. This was what humans call the understatement of the century. Commander Zixtal's ship was clearly designed for piracy, from its oversized weapons arrays to its cargo hold specifically designed for rapid transfer of stolen goods. Calling it a merchant vessel was like calling a tiger a large house cat. Technically accurate in the loosest possible sense, but missing the point entirely. We are specialized merchants, Commander Zixtal tried. Specialized in what? Grand Theft Starship? We prefer to think of it as aggressive marketing. Captain Brennan laughed despite himself. Aggressive marketing, I like that. Points for creativity, Commander. Unfortunately, creativity doesn't change the fact that you're pirates. We're the law, and you've got stolen goods in your cargo hold. How do you know about our cargo hold? Because, Admiral Foster interjected, while you were busy being impressed by our primitive technology, we've been scanning your ship. The quantum resonance from our minds makes an excellent sensor enhancement. Very thorough. We can tell you exactly what you're carrying, where you stole it from, and probably what you had for breakfast. This was actually true. Human sensor technology had advanced to the point where they could scan a ship so thoroughly that they could determine the molecular composition of the crew's last meal. It was the kind of technological achievement that was simultaneously impressive and slightly creepy. Sir, Communications Officer Clinth whispered. They're right. Our cargo manifest shows stolen art from the Centauri colonies, medical supplies from the vegan trade routes, and... oh no. What? The Altarian crystal sculptures, sir. The ones from the museum heist. Commander Zixtal's 4 eyes went wide. The Altarian crystal sculptures were famous throughout the galaxy, not just for their beauty, but for the fact that stealing them was considered a capital offense in 17 different star systems. They were also reportedly cursed, though that was probably just superstition. Probably. So, Admiral Foster continued, we have piracy, theft, possession of stolen cultural artifacts, and, let me see, operating a vessel with fraudulent identification. Did I miss anything? The weapons violations, Captain Chen added helpfully. Some of those plasma cannons aren't exactly civilian grade. Right, weapons violations. Thank you, Captain. Commander Zixtal was beginning to understand why humans had such a reputation in the galaxy. It wasn't just their technology or their military prowess. It was their thoroughly irritating habit of being right about everything while maintaining an attitude of casual competence. What exactly, he asked with as much dignity as he could muster, are your intentions? Well, Admiral Foster said thoughtfully, officially we're supposed to arrest you, confiscate your ship, and return the stolen property to its rightful owners. Unofficially. She paused, as if considering something. Unofficially? Commander Zixtal prompted. Unofficially, we're curious. See, Commander, piracy is usually a small-scale operation. A ship here, a cargo container there, but you guys have been busy. Our scans show evidence of at least 30 different heists across a dozen star systems. That's not just piracy, that's organization. Captain Brennan leaned forward in his chair. The question is, are you running this operation, or are you working for someone else? This was the question Commander Zixtal had been dreading. Because the truth was, the Kethmori weren't just pirates. They were the enforcement arm of something much larger and significantly more dangerous. Something that the humans probably wouldn't find as amusing as his crew's current predicament. I am bound by oath not to reveal— Oh, cut the dramatic nonsense, Admiral Foster interrupted. We're not asking you to betray your sacred honor or whatever. We're asking if you're the problem, or if you're just a symptom of the problem. The distinction was important because humans approach problems differently depending on their scope. A single pirate ship was a police matter. An organized crime syndicate was a military matter. And something larger than that, well, that was the kind of problem that made humans start using words like crusade and permanent solution. We are, Commander Zixtal began, then stopped. The oath he'd sworn to the Shadow Consortium was specific about not revealing their existence to outsiders. But it hadn't anticipated being caught by humans with time manipulation technology and a disturbingly thorough approach to interrogation. Take your time, Captain Brennan said casually. We've got all day. Well, actually, we've got about 6 hours before the rest of the fleet arrives. The rest of the fleet? Oh, did I forget to mention that? When you activated that distress beacon, it didn't just reach the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet. It reached everyone. The 5th Battle Group is about 4 hours out, and I think the 7th Reconnaissance Division was in the area too. Admiral Foster nodded. Plus the 2nd Assault Fleet, but they're probably still 3 days away. Traffic is murder in the outer systems this time of year. Commander Zixtal felt a creeping sensation that he recognized as impending doom. One human fleet was manageable, if terrifying. Multiple human fleets converging on his position suggested that the situation had escalated beyond his ability to control. How many ships are we talking about? He asked weakly. Oh, let's see. Admiral Foster made a show of consulting her tactical display. Roughly 12,000, give or take a few hundred. The exact number depends on whether the Martian Defense Force decides to join the party. 12,000 ships. Commander Zixtal's ship was armed well enough to take on a small patrol, maybe even a light cruiser if they were lucky. Against 12,000 human warships, his options ranged from immediate surrender to dignified suicide. Commander, Captain Brennan said gently, I think it's time to have an honest conversation. Who are you working for? The oath Commander Zixtal had sworn was supposed to be unbreakable. But the oath had been sworn to beings who had never encountered humans, and it hadn't included provisions for temporal displacement fields, gravity manipulation, or the prospect of facing 12,000 hostile warships. The Shadow Consortium, he said quietly. The effect was immediate. The casual banter among the human officers stopped, replaced by a sudden, sharp attention that was somehow more frightening than their earlier displays of technological superiority. Well, shit, Captain Brennan said, which was apparently the human equivalent of profound concern. Language, Captain, Admiral Foster chided, though her expression had gone from amused to deadly serious. Commander Zixtal, are you telling us that you're working for the Shadow Consortium? I am. Was a ship commander in their enforcement division. And the stolen goods? Payment. Tribute. The consortium taxes those who use the trade routes they control. Admiral Foster and Captain Brennan exchanged glances that spoke volumes. The Shadow Consortium wasn't just another criminal organization. They were the criminal organization. A vast network that operated across multiple galactic sectors and had been a thorn in the side of legitimate governments for centuries. How many ships does the consortium have in this sector? Admiral Foster asked. I cannot. Commander, Captain Brennan interrupted. Let me explain something about humans. We have this concept called the greater good. It means that sometimes, doing the right thing requires making difficult choices. Right now, you can choose to help us stop a criminal organization that preys on innocent people. Or you can choose to protect that organization. But my oath, your oath was to criminals, Admiral Foster pointed out. Criminals who, I might add, sent you out here to die. Because that's what this was, wasn't it? A suicide mission. Commander Zixtal's silence was answer enough. They knew this sector was under human patrol, Captain Brennan continued. They knew activating a distress beacon here would bring the entire fleet down on your head, and they sent you anyway. The truth was bitter, but it was truth nonetheless. The Shadow Consortium had been looking for an excuse to test human responses, and Commander Zixtal's crew had been the expendable assets chosen for the task. How many ships? Admiral Foster asked again, and this time her voice carried the weight of absolute authority. 47 warships in this sector, Commander Zixtal said quietly. Perhaps 200 support vessels, and the Dreadnought. If the mention of the Shadow Consortium had gotten the humans' attention, the mention of the Dreadnought had their complete focus. The Dreadnought is real? Captain Brennan asked. Very real. A flagship built from the salvaged remains of a dozen different fleets. Weapons systems from the old Terran-Kilran War. Shielding technology stolen from the Vegan Defense Force, and a hull that's been reinforced with materials I don't recognize. Admiral Foster was quiet for a long moment, clearly processing this information. The Dreadnought was a legend in military circles, a ship so powerful that its very existence was considered a threat to galactic stability. Where is it? She asked finally. The Nexus Station, a hidden base in the Void Belt, approximately 50 light-years from here. How many people are we talking about? Total consortium forces? Commander Zixtal considered lying, but the humans had been remarkably thorough in everything else. They'd probably know if he wasn't telling the truth. Approximately 10,000 combat personnel, perhaps twice that in support staff and recruited civilians. Recruited? Slaves, Commander Zixtal admitted. The consortium doesn't pay for labor when they can simply take it. The temperature in the conversation seemed to drop several degrees. Humans, as it turned out, had very strong opinions about slavery. Very strong, very violent opinions. I see, Admiral Foster said, and those two words carried enough menace to make a supernova seem cheerful. Captain Brennan, please contact Fleet Command. Tell them we have a priority alpha situation. Yes, ma'am. Should I mention the slavery aspect? Definitely mention the slavery aspect. Captain Brennan began typing rapidly on his console, sending what was presumably a very urgent message to very important people. Commander Zixtal, meanwhile, was beginning to realize that he had just provided humans with everything they needed to completely destroy the Shadow Consortium. Commander, Admiral Foster said, turning back to him. You're going to help us. What? You're going to help us eliminate the Shadow Consortium. Completely. Permanently. In a way that serves as an object lesson to anyone else who thinks slavery is a viable business model. But I am Keth Mori. We do not betray— You're not betraying anyone, Captain Brennan interrupted. You're choosing to help innocent people instead of helping criminals. There's a difference. Besides, Admiral Foster added, your options are somewhat limited. You can help us voluntarily, or you can sit in a detention cell while we figure this out on our own. Either way, the consortium is finished. Commander Zixtal looked around at his crew, seeing his own uncertainty reflected in their faces. They were pirates, yes, but they were also pragmatists. And right now, pragmatism suggested that cooperation with the humans was their only viable option. What do you want me to do? He asked. First, you're going to provide us with everything you know about consortium operations. Base locations, fleet movements, command structure, everything. Then, you're going to help us plan an assault that will shut them down permanently. And in return? Admiral Foster smiled, and for the first time, it wasn't entirely predatory. In return, you and your crew get to live. You'll serve time for your crimes, but you'll live. And more importantly, you'll have helped free thousands of people from slavery. It wasn't much of a choice, but it was more than Commander Zixtal had expected under the circumstances. And the truth was, he'd never been entirely comfortable with the consortium's methods. Piracy was one thing. It was almost a respectable profession in some circles. But slavery was something else entirely. Very well, he said. I will help you. Excellent, Admiral Foster replied. Captain Brennan, begin preparations for a full strategic conference, and contact the other fleets. Tell them we're going to need everyone for this one. What followed over the next several hours was a masterclass in human military planning. It started with Commander Zixtal providing detailed intelligence about consortium operations, which the humans fed into their tactical computers. Within minutes, they had a comprehensive picture of the enemy's capabilities, weaknesses, and probable responses. Then came the planning phase, which revealed another aspect of human nature that had contributed to their reputation in the galaxy. When humans decided to solve a problem, they didn't mess around. They approached military planning with the same creativity and thoroughness they brought to everything else, which resulted in strategies that were simultaneously brilliant and slightly unhinged. The dreadnought is the key, Admiral Foster explained during the strategic conference, which now included representatives from 6 different human fleets. If we can neutralize it, the rest of the consortium forces will fold. Direct assault? Asked Admiral Chen of the 5th Battle Group. Too risky. That ship is designed to take on entire fleets. We need to be smarter. Captain Brennan leaned forward. What about a decoy operation? Draw the dreadnought away from the base, then hit both targets simultaneously? Possible, but we'd need something big enough to make them think it's worth responding to. Admiral Torres of the 7th Reconnaissance Division smiled. Leave that to us. We've been working on some new stealth technology. If we can make it look like a major colony world is under attack, they'd have to respond. Admiral Foster agreed. The consortium makes too much money from colony raids to ignore a threat like that. Commander Zixtal listened to this exchange with growing amazement. The humans were planning to conduct simultaneous operations across multiple star systems, coordinate the movements of thousands of ships, and somehow make it look easy. It was the kind of strategic thinking that had made humanity a dominant force in the galaxy, despite being relative newcomers to interstellar civilization. What about the slaves? Commander Zixtal asked quietly. The conversation stopped. Every human officer turned to look at him, and he realized he'd just asked the question that was driving all of their planning. That's the priority, Admiral Foster said simply. Everything else is secondary. We're not just here to stop the consortium. We're here to free those people. Even if it means letting some of the criminals escape? Even if it means letting some of the criminals escape, Captain Brennan confirmed. Though between you and me, we're not planning on letting many of them get away. The final plan, when it emerged from 6 hours of intense discussion, was the kind of multi-layered operation that would have made ancient military theorists weep with either joy or terror. It involved 3 separate fleets, 4 decoy operations, 2 simultaneous assaults, and what Admiral Torres cheerfully described as enough coordinated mayhem to keep the tactical analysts busy for decades. The beauty of it was its simplicity beneath the complexity. While the consortium was dealing with apparent attacks on 3 different colony worlds, the real human force would be infiltrating the Nexus station to free the slaves. By the time the consortium realized what was happening, their leadership would be in custody and their forced labor camps would be empty.
How long do we have to prepare? Commander Zixtel asked.
Preparation is already complete, Admiral Foster replied.
We've been planning operations against the Shadow Consortium for 2 years. Your intelligence just filled in the missing pieces.
2 years?
Commander, did you really think a criminal organization that large could operate without us noticing? We've been building a case, gathering evidence, and positioning assets. Today just moved up our timeline. It was, Commander Zixtal realized, exactly the kind of long-term strategic thinking that made humans so dangerous. They didn't just react to problems, they anticipated them, prepared for them, and then solved them with overwhelming force and meticulous planning.
The operation began 18 hours later, and it was a thing of beauty.
The first phase involved Admiral Torres's stealth ships creating the illusion of attacks on 3 consortium-controlled colony worlds. The attacks looked devastating from a distance, massive explosions, burning cities, the works, but were actually carefully choreographed light shows designed to trigger maximum panic while causing minimal actual damage.
The consortium took the bait completely. The Dreadnought and most of their mobile forces rushed to defend what they thought were their most valuable assets, leaving the Nexus station defended by a skeleton crew.
That's when the humans revealed another aspect of their military doctrine that had been making other species nervous for decades. They were really good at sneaking around. The assault on Nexus station began with what the humans called aggressive stealth infiltration, which was a polite way of saying, we're going to sneak in and break everything. A dozen human special operations ships, equipped with cloaking technology that made them essentially invisible, slipped past the station's defenses and began the delicate work of liberation. Commander Zixtal, monitoring the operation from Captain Brennan's ship, watched in fascination as human special forces teams moved through the station with surgical precision. They neutralized security systems, subdued guards, and began evacuating slaves with the kind of efficiency that suggested they'd done this before.
"How many people have you rescued?" he asked Captain Brennan.
"From operations like this? Probably around 50,000 over the past 5 years. Slavery is unfortunately common in this part of the galaxy, but we've been working to change that."
50,000?
Give or take. We don't usually advertise these operations. It's better if the criminals don't know we're coming until we're already there. The evacuation of Nexus Station took 4 hours. 4 hours to free nearly 20,000 people who had been living in conditions that violated every civilized standard in the galaxy. The human rescue teams moved with a combination of military precision and compassionate urgency that was somehow both professional and deeply personal. Meanwhile, the consortium forces were discovering that their colony worlds were under attack by ghosts. Every time they moved to engage the human raiders, the targets simply vanished, leaving behind nothing but sensor echoes and very confused defenders. It wasn't until the Dreadnought tried to return to Nexus Station that the consortium leadership realized they'd been played. "Sir," came the panicked transmission from the station. "We have multiple human fleets converging on our position. The prisoners are gone, the command staff is in custody, and they're demanding our surrender." The response from the Dreadnought was predictably furious and completely unprintable in most galactic languages. "I think they're upset," Captain Brennan observed mildly as the consortium flagship changed course toward Nexus Station at maximum speed. "They're about to be more upset," Admiral Foster replied from her command ship. "All units, initiate Phase 3. Phase 3 was where the humans revealed that they'd been holding back during the earlier demonstrations.
As the Dreadnought approached what it thought was a lightly defended human force at Nexus Station, it instead found itself facing the combined firepower of 3 full battle fleets arranged in a formation that military historians would later describe as mathematically beautiful and tactically terrifying. The battle, such as it was, lasted approximately 15 minutes. The Dreadnought was indeed a formidable ship, equipped with weapons and defenses that could have challenged any single human vessel.
Against 300 human warships working in perfect coordination, however, it was less a battle and more a very expensive demonstration of why criminals shouldn't pick fights with people who specialized in violence. The dreadnought's surrender came when its shields failed, its weapon systems were disabled, and its captain realized that the humans had been careful to target non-essential systems. They could have destroyed the ship in the first minute of combat, but they'd chosen to disable it instead. "This is Admiral Foster to Consortium forces," came the transmission. "You are surrounded, outgunned, and out of options. Surrender now, and we guarantee fair treatment under galactic law. Continue fighting, and we'll demonstrate why humans have a reputation for solving problems permanently." The surrender was immediate and unconditional. In the aftermath, as Consortium personnel were processed, and the freed slaves were provided with medical care and transportation to safe worlds, Commander Zixtal found himself in an unusual position. He was technically a prisoner, but he was also being treated more like a consultant than a criminal. "What happens now?" he asked Captain Brennan as they watched the last of the rescue ships depart from Nexus Station. Now we clean up the mess. The Consortium had operations in 17 different star systems. We've got teams hitting all of them simultaneously. By this time tomorrow, the Shadow Consortium will be a historical footnote. And the slaves? Free. All of them. The medical teams estimate we'll have rescued close to 40,000 people when this is all over. Most of them will be able to return to their homeworlds, and the ones who can't will be offered citizenship in human space. Commander Zixtal was quiet for a moment, processing this information. "You do this often, don't you? These rescue operations?" "Often enough. It's part of our patrol mandate. Investigate distress calls, protect civilians, eliminate threats to galactic peace. Slavery falls under threats to galactic peace in a big way." "Why?" Captain Brennan looked at him seriously. "Because someone has to. Because slavery is wrong, regardless of what species is doing it or why they think it's justified. And because humans have this annoying habit of not being able to ignore suffering when we see it. Even when it means risking your lives. Especially when it means risking our lives. That's what makes us human, Commander. We do stupid, dangerous things because they're the right things to do." It was, Commander Zixtal realized, exactly the kind of attitude that had made humans both feared and respected throughout the galaxy. They weren't just powerful, they were powerful and principled, which was a combination that had historically caused problems for anyone who preferred their universe without consequences. "What about my crew and me?" "That depends on you. The legal charges are serious. Piracy, theft, conspiracy. But you've provided substantial assistance in a major operation. The prosecution might be willing to make a deal." "What kind of deal?" "Community service. Specifically helping us identify and shut down other criminal operations. You know how these organizations work, what to look for, how they operate. That knowledge could save lives." Commander Zixtal considered this. It wasn't the career change he'd been expecting when he woke up that morning. But it was better than spending the next 20 years in a detention facility. "And if I refuse?" "Then you refuse. We won't force you to help us. That would make us no better than the people we just arrested. But I think you know what the right choice is." He did know. The right choice was to help prevent other people from suffering the way the Consortium's slaves had suffered. The right choice was to use his knowledge and experience to make the galaxy a safer place. "I'll do it," he said. Captain Brennan smiled, the first genuine, non-predatory smile Commander Zixtal had seen from him. "Welcome to the good guys, Commander. Fair warning, though. The pay is terrible, the hours are worse, and you'll probably end up in more dangerous situations than you ever did as a pirate. But you'll sleep better at night." Epilogue. 6 months later. The cantina on Vegas Station was the kind of place where species from across the galaxy came to drink, argue, and occasionally engage in the sort of friendly violence that kept life interesting. It was also where Commander Zixtal, now Special Consultant Zixtal, met with his human contacts to plan their next operation. "So," Captain Brennan said, sliding into the booth across from him. "What do you have for us this time?" "The Crimson Syndicate," Zixtal replied, placing a datapad on the table. "Weapons smuggling primarily, but they've branched out into forced labor recently." "How many people are we talking about?" "Perhaps 3,000, mostly technical specialists, engineers, computer programmers, anyone with skills the Syndicate can exploit." Captain Brennan reviewed the data, his expression growing darker as he read. "Location?" "The Kepler Belt. They've got a mobile operation. 3 converted cargo haulers that never stay in one place for more than a few days. Tricky. Mobile targets require different tactics. Brennan looked up from the datapad. Any idea what their response time is like? Fast. They've got scouts throughout the sector, and they're paranoid about law enforcement. The moment they detect a military presence, they scatter. We'll need to be creative. Brennan grinned, and Zixtal had learned to recognize that expression. It meant the humans were about to do something that was simultaneously brilliant and completely insane. What are you thinking? Zixtal asked. I'm thinking we need a distraction. Something big enough to make them think they're safe to stay in one place for a while. Such as? Trade conference. Big, public, lots of commercial traffic. The kind of event that makes smugglers think they can blend in. Brennan's grin widened. Of course, the trade conference would be completely fake, staffed by undercover human agents, and surrounded by enough firepower to level a small moon. You're going to create an entire fake trade conference just to catch weapons smugglers? Why not? We've got the resources, and it's the kind of operation that sends a message to other criminals. Besides, after the consortium operation, word has gotten around that humans don't mess around when it comes to slavery. That was true. The elimination of the Shadow Consortium had sent shockwaves through the galactic underworld. Criminal organizations that had operated with impunity for decades were suddenly looking over their shoulders, wondering if they were next on humanity's list. The Syndicate won't be expecting something this elaborate, Zixtal admitted. No, they won't. And by the time they realize what's happening, 3,000 people will be free, and the Syndicate will be in custody. It was, Zixtal reflected, exactly the kind of approach that made humans so effective at law enforcement. They didn't just respond to crimes. They created elaborate scenarios to prevent them, using creativity and overwhelming resources to stay one step ahead of the criminals. When do we start? He asked. Planning starts tomorrow. Execution is in 3 weeks. Think you can handle another undercover operation? I suppose I'm getting used to being one of the good guys. Captain Brennan laughed. Just wait until you see what we've got planned for the Nexus pirates. That operation is going to be legendary. As they left the cantina together, Zixtal found himself looking forward to the next mission. It was strange. 6 months ago he'd been a criminal himself, taking what he wanted from whoever was too weak to stop him. Now he was working to stop people like his former self, and somehow that felt more satisfying than any successful heist ever had. Maybe Captain Brennan had been right. Maybe he was sleeping better at night. The galaxy was a big place, full of dangers and injustices that needed addressing. But it was also full of humans, with their stubborn insistence on doing the right thing regardless of the cost. And now it was full of reformed criminals like Zixtal, who had learned that there was more satisfaction in helping people than in exploiting them. It wasn't a perfect universe, but it was getting better, one rescue operation at a time. And somewhere in the depths of space, another distress beacon was about to activate, calling for help from anyone listening. The call would be answered, of course. It always was, because that's what humans did. They responded to distress calls. All of them. The end.